the extraordinary nature of this country at the moment has been completely turned upside down. It was bad enough to start off with, given the dominance of right-wing media, but since Elon Musk bought Twitter, it has gone absolutely bonkers. And the reason is really, really simple. It sells. And if you're not counting, remember, you don't even have to count, you just count clicks now. So even if someone is looking at something with a sense of horror, when you're giving those statistics to an advertiser, that's a customer. So if you are in the attention economy, if you are in the business of drawing as much attention, whether it's positive or negative, to whatever it is you're selling, in this case, simply content on social media, then that is the reality that we currently inhabit. And everything gets exacerbated and magnified out of all sensible proportions. I've only had 2 as far as I can tell, but terrible events in Uxbridge yesterday, reportedly involving, and I have to say that for legal reasons, a man who came here from Afghanistan on a lorry. I can't say much more about it for very easy to understand legal reasons, but the kind of people who are the kind of people I'm thinking of at the moment are the kind of people texting me to insist that there's some sort of conspiracy or some sort of cover-up. If somebody gets murdered, the only proper human response to that, in the very first instance, is horror and sympathy for the people left behind. Then you can, as details emerge, move on to anger at the perpetrator. That's perfectly natural. That's perfectly normal. If somebody gets murdered and your first response is delight at the opportunity it will give you to malign or demonize other people who have absolutely nothing to do with that murder, there is something very deeply wrong with you. But if you're on Twitter, you will feel normal. That is probably the best illustration of the mess that we're in that I'm able to provide you with. So I will say it again. If somebody is murdered, the only decent human reaction in the first instance, if somebody is, God forbid, raped, because there are a couple of stories in the news involving allegedly racially aggravated rape at the moment, which I can't talk about in any more detail for the same reason that I can't talk about events yesterday in Uxbridge. But if somebody is murdered or raped, if your first reaction isn't sympathy for the victim and their families and horror at the act that has been perpetrated, followed by, perfectly naturally, perfectly normally, anger at the perpetrator, there's something very, very wrong with you. If your reaction to a hideous crime, whether it is in Southport, Uxbridge or Wolverhampton, is to rub your hands with glee at the opportunity it provides for you to either spread lies or exaggerations and demonize and attack people who have absolutely nothing to do with those crimes, then there is something very, very wrong with you. And Elon Musk's great achievement since buying Twitter is to make those people feel normal. To respond to hideous crimes by rubbing your hands in glee, rubbing your thighs in delight at the opportunity it provides you with to attack human beings who have nothing whatsoever to do, have no more to do with the crime that's being committed than you do, but you see this as a wonderful opportunity to attack them, you really need to give your head the mother of all wobbles. And it is, I'm afraid, as simple as that. But the reason why he bought Twitter was to create an environment in which that reaction feels normal. To react to a crime by wanting to attack or even perhaps set fire to buildings containing people who have nothing to do with the crime is a hideous human condition that is being fermented and fertilized on social media in ways that are increasingly terrifying. It's not my job to come up with an answer. It's actually the government's now. You've got people calling for violence on our streets against people who've done absolutely nothing wrong. You've got people calling for human beings to be set alight, set afire in their beds who've done absolutely nothing wrong, turned into political heroes by the kind of characters, the kind of politicians, the kind of pundits who are rubbing their hands in glee at the opportunity provided by a hideous murder to turn their hatred on people who had no more to do with that murder than they did. I can't believe that I have to say this out loud. It used to be obvious. And the opportunity to take a hideous crime and turn it into a weapon with which to hurt people who had nothing to do with that hideous crime used to be beyond the remit of public discourse. It used to be beyond, quite literally, the pale. But it's normal now. And as soon as it becomes normal on Twitter, and this is why Elon Musk bought it, it starts becoming normal outside Twitter. It starts becoming normal in the pages of your newspapers. On a much less serious level, when somebody like Sarah Pochin expresses hideously racist views on a television station that exists essentially to disseminate hideous views, it used to be beyond the pale. When they invited Nick Griffin onto Question Time, it was a subject of national debate. A subject of national debate, the leader of the British National Party. People were queuing up on both sides to say, everybody agrees that his views are hideous, but they should be heard so that we can deal with them. Now, Sarah Pochin comes out with views that Nick Griffin would consider absolutely correct, and the argument up to and including Daily Mail columnists like Richard Littlejohn, the world has moved so much, the argument is, well, she's not said anything wrong. It's ridiculous even to suggest that the racism she did is racist. It all is about normalization and moving windows. So on a rhetorical level, you've got Sarah Pochin and Robert Jenrick doing the racism, secure in the knowledge that some useful idiots, fellow travellers, and indeed fellow racists will join them in pretending that it's not racism. And then when a hideous crime happens, these people don't see tragedy, they don't see horror, they see opportunity. They see the opportunity to attack people who had nothing to do with the crime. And I think it is a British value to remind you that we are better than that. Purely, simply, and correctly. We are better than that. And what we discussed yesterday was the difficulty of identifying people who are not in that category, but who are, for example, exercised by the accommodation of asylum seekers in buildings in their community that used to be hotels, that still have the word hotel, perhaps, on the sign outside, but are nothing like what they were like when people were paying 100 quid a night, 200, 300 quid a night to stay there. And I came away from yesterday's programme surprisingly encouraged, largely by a caller called Tamara, who rang from Telford, who is, I fear, about to become part of the programme's furniture in a positive way, akin to the way in which that woman in the jewellery room at Isleworth Crown Court in February became part of the furniture of the programme for a while in a very negative way. She's the one that was telling fellow jurors that Brigitte Macron or Michelle Obama are definitely men, and that Volodymyr Zelensky has spent all the aid money sent to Ukraine on 3 of the biggest yachts in the world. And she had the photos to prove it, because she'd found them on she'd seen them on social media. And it was both the matter-of-factness and, because I'm prejudiced in some ways, her middle-classness that really resonated with me. She seemed educated. It's probably the best way of putting it. And sadly, we live in a country where education and class often, but not always, go hand in hand. And I don't know how many people, because the public discourse has been so hideously skewed by the leaching of racist hatred from Twitter now into a mainstream media in this country that was already pretty racism adjacent, but has now go all in on defending the racism of people like Sarah Pochin and Robert Jenrick, including many members of the Tory party and obviously the Farage party. I just don't know. I still don't know how many people are in each camp. The unreachables, who see a hideous tragedy and think, here's a wonderful opportunity to attack people who had nothing to do with it, but who are the same colour as someone who reportedly did, or the same ethnicity, or have something similar on their background or on their CV. Let's attack all of them. Let's set fire to a building full of people that had nothing to do with the crime that's just been committed, because they, them, other, this. I don't know. How do you count them? And then you've got the people who Keir Starmer is trying to, what word are you going to use here? Appease, reach, woo, persuade. And the story has changed since yesterday in a way that's a little bit embarrassing for me, because I presumed that the big drive behind the desire or the plan to move more asylum seekers into army barracks, into disused military barracks, and they are largely disused, and if they are used, they're not used for permanent accommodation. So that was the first lie that the right-wing media set running yesterday. The possibility is, the very real possibility is that it will actually cost more to accommodate them in disused army barracks than it does in hotels. This story, of course, lands on the same day that we discover the profits posted by the companies given the contracts to run the so-called hotels that are not hotels. They're kind of glorified dormitories, have hit record levels once again. That, for me, as someone who tried, a clear-eyed and honest man, that for me is the scandal here, that the three major suppliers behind this system have already made £383 million in profits through these contracts. But the government, it emerged yesterday, may end up paying more in some cases for the accommodation than they are paying to put these people in hotels. And the reason that they've given, and this is a very different conversation from the one we had yesterday, a very different justification, rationale, explanation than the one we had yesterday. It's worth paying extra money to quell public disquiet. I want you to think about this for a moment. It's worth paying extra money to quell public disquiet. So what you have now, and hold my hand here because I'm going into this cold this morning. What you have now is two constituencies. The one we explored yesterday were the people with, quotes, legitimate concerns, end quotes. And that's not a snide quote, by the way. That's why I enjoyed Tamara's call so much, because she really nailed legitimate concerns about immigration without sounding remotely racist. And I also worry about the cost of this because, well, in very simple terms, a few companies are making £383 million out of the deal. So I guess I suffer from a form of public disquiet about these costs, caused largely by the size of the backlog, of course, which was, of course, a consequence of the last government. But I don't know whether anybody cares about that anymore. We might find out at PMQs. And now you've got the government saying, no. It's not them. It's not that public disquiet that we're worried about. We're not worried about the people who think that the cost is unsustainable and unjustifiable. We're worried about the people who don't want these facilities in their towns. We're worried about the public disquiet of people not wanting these facilities in their environs. So we're going to move them to somebody else's environs. We're going to move them into more isolated parts of the country. I haven't checked, but there'll be protests outside the army barracks soon if there aren't already. Because that first category of people don't want them anywhere. And that is a real and unignorable phenomenon. We don't want them anywhere. The second category of people don't think we should be spending as much money on this as we currently are. And the third category of people probably think that the best way of working through this backlog is the way that we are currently working through it. I know I'm not in the first category. I don't think, or certainly yesterday I wasn't in the third category. I was in the second category because I thought that it was costing too much to do it and that this would be cheaper. But the government have come out today or yesterday and defended the prospect of paying more to house asylum seekers in disused military barracks instead of hotels because the cost is worth it. It's a price worth paying to quell public disquiet. My question to you is twofold. Is it? And will it? So you remember the protests outside the hotel in Epping because of at the time, allegations, now convicted criminal, a sex offender who'd assaulted a 14-year-old girl and a woman, and people used his activities, his crimes, to malign everybody else in the building. And that's a lot easier to understand than reading about a crime on the other side of the country and deciding that that is somehow relevant to the people of the same ethnicity living around the corner from you. So you got the protests, you got the people saying it's just concerned mums. The man that they were concerned about had already been collared at that point, but they were concerned mums. And it was hard to feel the same negativity towards them that you feel to the kind of people using more recent crimes to make political capital. But will it quell public disquiet? And is it worth spending the money?